Over the past several years, I've gotten increasingly involved in local politics. I've always had a passion for how we build things and how we get around our spaces that we build, but I've gotten more and more into it, obviously, as seen through my YouTube channel and my podcast, and of course, as my friends have seen as I talk to them about these sorts of things. But it really got started off when I got some comments on this YouTube channel about getting involved in Strong Towns Calgary and More Neighbours Calgary. Strong Towns advocates for small, slow, and fiscally responsible changes led by the community. This is something that resonated deeply with me, both from the perspective of someone who tries to be fiscally responsible and from the perspective of somebody who loves his community and wants people here to be involved in creating the place that we want it to be. More Neighbours Calgary was formed after Calgary City Council's failure to adopt the housing strategy and the recommendations from a task force they created. And through their advocacy work, they eventually saw through the adoption of those recommendations. Today, they continue to advocate for using every tool in the toolbox to create not just housing affordability, but housing availability as well. And not just for the people who call Calgary home today, but for those who will call it home tomorrow. Later in the year, along with a fantastic team of people who I couldn't be more proud of, we co-founded Calgary Transit Riders. As a daily transit user, I see the day-to-day of things that can be improved. That said, I'm just one transit user. So Calgary Transit Riders advocates on behalf of all transit users, taking into account their feedback and their experiences, not just one person. Getting involved in organizations like these, Strong Towns, More Neighbours, and Calgary Transit Riders, I learned a few things. Everything in our city was thought of, designed, and built by people. People like you and like me. And we've been doing it wrong, and things need to change. And this need for change is no better seen than in the number of traffic deaths Calgarians experienced last year. We lost friends, family, and community members, more than we've seen in years. That demonstrates the problem with how we've been building. We also are still in the midst of a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis. So we've got money problems, we have housing problems, and we have transportation problems. And these just so happen to be three of the biggest things that I care about. And that's why I'm running for Calgary City Council right here where I live in Ward 11. I'm Alex Williams, and this is Humane Cities, a channel about getting involved in local politics. I've always believed we have the power, the agency to change things, the ability to decide what our world looks like and how we're going to get around it. Everything that we see around us is that way because someone decided to make it that way. The house that I'm in right now was built in the 1960s, and someone in the 1950s and 60s decided this is where we're going to build that house. So you can see the decisions that we make today have a long-lasting impact on not just us, but future generations as well. Our streets are laid out the way that they are, whether that's with a grid pattern or with some loops or roundabouts or traffic lights. All of these things were designed because people like you and I decided they should be like that. City councils, builders, administration, and individuals decide what our city looks like, whether that's the decision that I might make to plant flowers in my front yard, or the decision that a city council might make to build or to not build transit. Speaking of transit, our bus schedules are what they are because someone made the decision to make them that way, whether it's a great service or a poor service, or whether it's just kind of fine. And all of these groups and people are just that. They're just people, and we're just people, and we can do things differently. On top of believing in our ability to do amazing things, I also believe that in order to know what needs to be done, we also have to experience it ourselves. That's why about a year and a half ago, I sold my car. I was constantly hearing people talk about the need to improve transit or the need for mobility options like wheeling lanes or better sidewalks or just fixing potholes in the road. But of course, I wasn't using transit and I wasn't biking around and I wasn't walking around as much as I could. So I sold my car so that I would know what it would be like to be a daily transit user, even when making inconvenient trips. I would frequently talk people's ears off about the need for better mobility options, better mobility freedom, like biking, walking, and transit, as well as driving. But at the time, I had really only experienced driving around the city. I would maybe use transit if I was going to a big event like a hockey game or headed downtown for the day. But otherwise, I would drive everywhere and hardly ever bike anywhere. For several years, I didn't even own a bike. But I believe in putting my money where my mouth is. So I sold my car and have been car free for a year and a half. I still drive every now and then. Cars are a great tool that you can use to get around the city and fill a specific niche on some trips. And I also now know and understand and appreciate the importance of quality transit, quality wheeling infrastructure, and quality walking infrastructure. To know what's wrong with transit, you can't just take transit once, take a few photos, and say, yeah, okay, I think I get it now. You have to actually experience it. You have to experience transit on the trip to work, on the trip to get groceries, on the trip to a friend's house. You have to experience what it's like when the bus you need doesn't come past 8 p.m. and you have to cut hanging out with friends on a Saturday night short. You have to actually get it. So over this past year and a half, I've spent a significant amount of time sitting at transit stops, chatting with other transit riders about their experiences, and of course, experiencing transit for myself. So last year, myself and a few others, like I mentioned, co-founded Calgary Transit Riders, a member-based organization advocating for improvements to transit, both big and small. Transit riders are often less well represented, both in city engagements and at public hearings. Sometimes because they're a little bit too busy trying to get around the city and feed their family. We wanted to bring those issues to the fore, to represent the underrepresented and often the over-impacted. If you're in Calgary, take a moment and join Calgary Transit Riders. They're doing some fantastic work. Like I mentioned, it's not just important how we get around the city, but also how we live here and whether or not we can live here. I know for many young people, it's a concern whether or not they'll be able to ever move out of their parents' house. And for many elderly people, the cost of housing is also a major concern. And even if you have the money to pay for housing, it can be hard to find it. I myself experienced that when I spent 4 months looking for a place to live, even offering up to 6 months rent up front, still being denied the opportunity to have a roof over my head. Were it not for supportive family and friends who let me stay with them while I was looking, I would have been homeless with a job and money in the bank. This is why I always make it key that I mention availability, not just affordability. We need housing all along the continuum, both high-rise apartments, single detached homes, and the stuff in the middle like townhomes and 5/1s. I'm grateful for the people at More Neighbors Calgary who know a lot more about housing than I do and have continuously helped me understand what kind of improvements we can be making in the city to make it more accessible to people who want to live here and, frankly, for the people who already do live here. And so housing of all varieties is critical to my campaign and my personal city building philosophy. There are people in Calgary of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all family types and styles who are looking for housing and who are struggling to find that housing. Over the past year and a half, I have been an advocate for more housing. I've been an advocate for safe housing. I've been an advocate for, I guess you could call it, housing freedom, the opportunity to live in the type of housing in a price range that suits you. And I will continue to fight for that. If you've seen my video on the cost of car ownership, particularly on the cost of my own car ownership, then you know going car free for me wasn't just about putting my money where my mouth is and trying to experience mobility freedom and advocate for that mobility freedom. It was also a financial decision. Particularly interesting was that I had kept all of the receipts for gas that I had paid over the years. I had kept all of the insurance bills and all of the maintenance bills for the car. So it was interesting to see it all calculated up. And well, for many people, I know, and I get comments about this on every single video, and I talk to people about it regularly. For many people, having a car financially makes sense to them. If you've got kids to drive to hockey practice, that makes sense. I currently do not have kids to drive to hockey practice. I may someday have kids to drive to hockey practice, in which case I would own a car. Fiscal responsibility isn't just about penny pinching, it's about getting good bang for your buck. And on the municipal level, that's about how we spend our tax dollars and spending our tax dollars in ways that actually make people feel like they're getting their money's worth. Now, the fiscal responsibility is one aspect of the Strong Towns approach to city building. Important to also highlight is the importance of doing things from the bottom up, doing things in a way that lets the community lead, doing things in a way that hears the needs of the community and listens to the needs of the community, and finding ways aligned with those common shared values to accomplish what we want to accomplish. If it takes your community 4 months to get the permit to build a pergola, well, that's neither community focused or fiscally responsible. Obviously, there are a lot of reasons I'm running and a lot of things that I care about, and even more things that I'm learning about every day. If you have book recommendations, particularly ones that will assist me in my effort to both become and be a Calgary City Councillor, please leave them down in the comments. There's a lot more to being on City Council than transit, housing, and fiscal responsibility. These are just some of the things that I think would be most interesting to the audience on my Humane Cities YouTube channel. As the year carries on and I continue to campaign for the Ward 11 council seat here in Calgary, I'll keep this channel going, mostly as it has been, though hopefully a little bit more regularly. And if you're in Calgary, I'd love to have you aboard for the campaign. Cities aren't built overnight, and they certainly aren't built alone. You can join the team using the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and if you want to follow the campaign more closely, you can follow me at Alex Williams YYC on pretty much everything.